What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something a little bit different than the everyday unboxing or review. Today I'm going to be checking out The Witcher 3, which is an awesome game, from what I've heard. I've actually never played the other Witchers, and I've never even started playing this game until about a day or two ago. But I've actually had this game for quite some time now, for a couple months. A few months ago, my good buddy Cell Processing, go ahead and follow him on Twitter. He gave me a game code to this game, mainly for benchmarking. And I haven't gotten around to it because I've just been so swamped up until now. So I thought I would do a video on it. Now, granted, there are a ton of Witcher 3 PC performance videos already online, some which are really good. In fact, if you haven't seen Joker's content, go ahead and check out Joker Productions on YouTube. He does some really great Witcher 3 content with his ridiculous gaming PC. And you should just subscribe to his channel in general because he's got a lot of good tech content out there. But I figured I would still chime in with my 2 cents, no J pun intended, just because every system and every scenario and every user is going to be different. Speaking of which, I've got a Hotline PC. I say that like it's some mass-manufactured thing. Oh, it's one of those hotlines. This is Hotline, my custom water-cooled PC that I built a few months ago. It's got a 5960X as well as 2 GTX 980 Ti's in SLI. Very high-end gaming machine. So because of that, I am going to be gaming at 4K. That's the resolution that we're going to be focusing on for the purpose of this video. And I'm just going to see what kind of quality settings I can get away with. And also, we're going to be checking out things like HairWorks. Why don't we just jump right into it, hey? Let's do that. I'm going to give you a look at my system settings. Alright, so you can see I'm running at 4K, as I mentioned. Actually, let's look at the post-processing. I'm not enabling anti-aliasing at all, simply because at 4K you really can't tell the difference. In some games you can. There are some games where I've noticed the difference. Like in GTA 5, I can tell. I can tell there's a little bit of jaggies. I mean, it's just a little bit, but it's there. I can't tell at all in Witcher 3. So I'm leaving it off at this resolution just because it'll give me a lot more performance in the long run, of course. Now, even more heavy-hitting than anti-aliasing is Nvidia HairWorks. And when you actually enable this setting in-game, it automatically applies an 8x MSAA filter to all the hairs that are being rendered. Primarily the hair that is on the protagonist in this game. His name is Geralt. I'm going to pronounce that wrong at some point if I'm not already. So it applies an 8x MSAA filter to his hair, which is pretty intensive, and you take a huge performance hit because of that. And there's no way in-game to actually bump that setting down. You either have 8x MSAA or you have HairWorks completely disabled. But why don't we just dive right into exactly how to change the various quality settings of HairWorks. So, like I said, you have to go out of the game. It's not there. And I already have the window popped up here, so in my local C drive, I've got GOG Games. Sorry, Steam, I betrayed you this time around. And in the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt folder, you're going to go to Bin, and then Config, and then Base. And in the Base folder, you'll find Resources. Go ahead and click that. Opens up this. Nope, it's not Resources. I take that back. It's Rendering. Open up Rendering. Close Resources. Open up Rendering. I'm not going to edit that out. I don't care. And at the bottom here, towards the bottom, you'll see a line that says HairWorks AA level equals, and then a value. And obviously, like I said, it's going to start off at 8. 8x MSAA. You can change that value, to 4, 2, or 0. Each one going down in quality, but also stepping up in performance, which equates to more frames per second. And I actually have a chart here that I created. Look at all this fancy stuff, fancy data. I love charts and graphs and lines and numbers. They're great. So keeping in mind this is at 4K, this is being tested at ultra settings and average frame rate on the left side here. So just starting off on the right side, I know it's kind of weird, but this is HairWorks disabled, and I was getting 67 frames per second on average without any kind of HairWorks at all. As soon as I enabled it, which is 8x by default, it dropped all the way down to 53 frames per second on average, which is a huge hit. Granted, his hair looks super sexy, but honestly not worth it. So what happens if you crank it down to 4x MSAA? What is the performance cost versus the cosmetic effect? So you do go up 3 frames per second on average, which is a decent bump, I suppose. And that's with very little to no degradation in quality. As far as like the naked eye could see, I couldn't really tell much of a difference other than the very tips of the finer strands of hair. That's when you really start to see a drop off in qualities with the really fine tips of his hair. But even then, at 4x MSAA, I didn't see too much of a difference. So if you are inclined to chase that eye candy and you do want HairWorks enabled, I would suggest 4x MSAA as the happy medium. When you go to 2x MSAA, you do go up 1 frame. It's really not that big of a jump. But here's where you really start to see an even larger drop off in quality as far as the little texture, the aliasing on Geralt's hair. Damn, stupid folklore names. Geralt's hair really starts to deteriorate a little bit, even at the top. And at 0x MSAA, it's just jaggies everywhere. Jaggies on the tips, jaggies on the top of his head. And this isn't only noticeable in certain dialogue scenes, but also just when he's, a medium distance away from the camera when you're walking around in the environment. You can actually see the jaggies on his head because the hairs are so close together that it kind of creates this weird screen door effect across the entirety of his hair, and it looks a bit distorted, and it's really distracting, to be honest. So don't even bother with 0x MSAA. Either do 2 or 4, but 8 is the other extreme that I wouldn't bother with, because 4 looks just as good, as I mentioned. Now, another thing worth mentioning is that when HairWorks is enabled, regardless of which MSAA quality you have it at, the hair on Geralt in particular looks pretty stunning, I have to admit. It is kind of gimmicky, but when you're zoomed in really close, which obviously 99% of the game you're not, but when you are, the level of detail is pretty epic, and you can actually see the hair appears a lot more lifelike. It kind of like flows, and the way it blows in the wind, it's what we call physics, folks. The physics on the hair is really good, and it kind of swishes on his back and his shoulders very organically, and it is very pretty when you're actually up close and can actually see it. Now, on the other hand, when you have HairWorks disabled, a lot of that goes away. The hair all of a sudden looks a lot more animated, it looks a little bit more cartoonish, and you kind of lose that organic, natural, lifelike feel. There's less movement overall, in the wind especially, and the hair kind of no longer swishes, but it just kind of hovers over the back of his head and his shoulders and stuff like that. His hair also just kind of looks a little bit more dry, which I think looks just fine, and it looks even better when you realize that there's like 15 to 20% performance increase with his hair looking that way, as opposed to sexy James Bond slicked back with gel. They should call it Nvidia Hair Gel, not HairWorks. That's my recommendation. But yeah, so as you can see, I'm not a huge fan. I'm not really sold on the HairWorks thing, unless you just have the ridiculously overkilled system of your dreams, and you can go balls to the wall. My conclusion is that eye candy seekers will want to put HairWorks at least 4x and above, I guess, for extreme smoothness, but that's going to come at the cost of a major performance hit, and even high-end dual GPU setups like mine will have a hard time consistently averaging 60 frames per second at those particular settings. So I say, in the end, not really worth it. Alright, so switching gears here from all that HairWorks talk, I'm going to show you guys basically the in-game quality settings that I'm using currently with my ridiculous system at 4K. You would think like you could just run this game at Ultra no problem with my setup, having 2 GTX 980 Ti's. And at first I thought that would be, quite possible as well. And really the answer is it is, but what is my horse doing right now? I cannot... Come on, Roach. My system can handle this game at Ultra at 4K. However, you're going to be dipping into the low 50s at your worst. So in those really graphically intensive scenes, mainly in combat and like just tons of like foliage out in the distance, you're going to be dropping into the low 50s, which I feel is a bit too choppy for my liking. If you go to high settings, your average, my average was 68 frames per second, and my minimum at any given point was 58. Now, that 58 actually happens very infrequently. Even graphically intensive scenes, you're still getting 60, 61. It's only just in those rare instances when you dip into the really high 50s, which I'm okay with because there's absolutely no noticeable change in gameplay. It doesn't seem choppy at all like it does in the low 50s. So I'm okay with going from Ultra to high, especially at 4K. Now, what are the other quality drawbacks from going from Ultra to high, excuse me? And honestly, they're not nearly as bad as I thought they would be. For one, you don't get quite as many nice shadows way off in the distance. Obviously, this is a really expansive open environment. Another thing you might notice going from Ultra to high settings is the grass density. Now, this doesn't change nearly as much as it does in a game like GTA 5, for example. When you go from ultra to high, it's just like, where the hell did all the grass go? It's just like a huge difference. But in Witcher 3, there really isn't that much of a difference. And you can see here from some of the screenshots, it really is quite negligible. And I honestly didn't even notice that some grass was missing going from ultra to high until I actually had both of those pieces of footage played back to back. And lastly, the other thing that you might notice going from ultra to high settings is just the level of texture detail. This includes things like the sheath on Geralt's back, or maybe some of the tessellation that's on his outfit. Some things like that stand out a little bit, but honestly, really not too bad. I have to commend the developers for making this game so damn scalable. Even when the settings aren't maxed out, it still looks incredible. I really can't tell. I mean, maybe I just haven't played it long enough, but I can't tell high from ultra when I'm in game. Someone could just switch my settings on me last minute, and I would have no idea. But there you go. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video, guys. I know it was kind of haphazardly thrown together and probably wasn't the most polished. Hopefully you guys appreciate the raw format from time to time. I know I do. It's a lot more casual and a little bit more enjoyable sometimes. But thank you all for sticking around. So go ahead and toss me a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one.